Hey, what's up? It's Dr. Nate, and this is Module 3.2, Intersectionality and LGBTQ Representation. I want to talk about intersectionality that is specifically influenced by LGBTQ people, but I'm going to use the example of Empire from Fox Television in order to better explain it, and then have you look at intersectionality in two different media artifacts on Netflix as well. So Empire, I'm sure you've heard of Empire. It is Jussie Smollett is the star of it, and he's been in the news quite frequently for a lot of various things. He was attacked in a homophobic attack in Chicago, and then people said he lied, and there was this investigation, and then the police department dropped the charges, and Jussie, of course, still asserts that this is something that happened. But homophobic attacks are happening rampant all over the country, and I think the most disproportionately affected LGBTQ individual is the Black trans woman. So we're gonna look at Empire because this was the first time that we really had a Black gay character that was central to the entire show, and not just central, but one of the main characters. So the show itself looks at like kind of this King Lear type of dynamic where you have Lucius Lyon and Cookie. Lucius is like the patriarch, and he has this huge giant Empire record label, and he finds out he is going to pass away, so he has to leave it to one of his three sons, and this is season 1. We're now like season, I think, 4 or 5, and in the first season he has to kind of find out which of the sons he's going to leave it to. One of them, Jussie Smollett's character Jamal, is a gay individual, and so he's kind of struggling with coming out. He's living in this very Black culture. He's also living in a hip-hop culture, so for him he has all these different intersectional identities that interfere with not just his coming out process, but also how he negotiates his masculinity. We see a lot of hegemonic masculinity coming to play here. So I did a couple of research papers on this. The main one that I'm going to talk about, though, is the one that is on season 1 of Empire, where we looked at different types of interactions with Jussie Smollett's character Jamal, as well as instances where characters in the show were talking about Jamal as well too. Before we dive into that, I really used different types of theories to kind of come together when we get to queer theory, which I'll explain here in just a second. So we talked about hegemonic masculinity quite a bit last week. It's the subordination of women and non-masculine males, elite version of masculinity. There's like this hierarchy, right, where straight, cisgender, masculine males are at the top, and then women are always going to be positioned at the bottom. And then in between there's all these different levels of masculinity that go back and forth, and men will use different types of policing in terms of behavior, rhetoric, the way that they interact with people, the way they don't interact with people, to kind of reinforce this masculinity so they can stay higher up on the hierarchy. It's restricted on gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, power, and race. So all these different intersections come to play as to where the male's position is going to be on this hegemonic masculinity hierarchy. There's also something called homomasculinity, and this talks about internal hegemony, which unites practices from different parts of masculinities in order to reproduce this patriarchy, and it's usually present in gay men. To kind of, in recompense for their sexuality, they use misogyny and other forms of masculine policing in order to reify their male privilege. There's this societal pressure to shape and maintain masculinity, like I said, in recompense for their sexuality, and of course there's not a lot of power and status for some individuals, which the socioeconomic status and all that comes into play as well too, and it's encouraged by society through media portrayals of these model masculinities. Another paper that I did with some group of individuals from Texas Tech University looked at this theory that we developed called masking, and it's where these gay males, cisgender males specifically, abide by heteronormative benchmarks to reify a hierarchy of masculinities among gay males. And so you might think of this in terms of like mask for mask, or individual gay males who kind of say, I'm not a sissy, I'm not a girl, no homo, all these different things, and they try to act like bros or act very masculine in order to kind of reify this hierarchy of hegemonic masculinity. And so all these different theoretical kind of tenets really look at how masculinity is being manifested in the gay community, specifically with gay males, because that's what we're looking at here primarily first. So queer theory, as you remember from the last module, had a lot of criticisms. The main criticism is that it was very white, male-centric, and cisgender-centric, right? And because of that, other forms of feminist theory started using queer theory as a foundation to kind of build new theoretical tenets from. Queer theory is one of those. It was created by E.P. Johnson, and he got the name from his grandmother who grew up in the South, and she couldn't say queer, so she'd say queer. And he heard her say queer instead of queer, and he thought that would be the perfect name for his theory. So what this does is it's kind of like queer theory, but it considers the intersections of race, gender, class, and sexual orientation all together. So it's primarily looking at all the different identities that surround the central identity of being LGBTQ. It directly challenges the hegemony of white queer normativity and the assumed white identity. So a lot of times when we think of just the queer identity, people automatically assume that it's about somebody who is white. And what he's trying to do is to disrupt that. Remember, to queer something is to disrupt it. And he wants to take white from being the baseline and just be one of the other categories of these intersections. It's also phenomenological in nature. We talked about what phenomenology is, and that is basically the study of lived experiences. And what it's looking for is the lived experience of LGBTQ people of color. It is also something that is used again to disrupt, but to critique these, what we would think are stable notions of identity, at the same time locate racialized and class knowledges. So it's really looking at identity and how all of these different space and time and identities and SES and all these different things come to play in the negotiation of a person's overall identity. It's nuanced, it's idiosyncratic, it's individualized, it's subjective, and so it's a great theory to put in as a lens when you look at specific different types of mediated characters. And like Jamal, that's what we're going to look at. We also have to do a quick review of different types of Black gay characters that have been portrayed on television. Usually they are very stereotyped. They have these interpersonal problems. They are often violent, self-destructive. There's this failure for them to have sustained romantic relationships. One of them will cheat, or they'll do something that completely disrupts the relationship. This is not the first time that we kind of look at this. It has been something that has been talked about for a long time in academia. In 1991, Riggs did what he considered Negro faggotry. And what he called it was this effeminate, cute, comic homosexuality in gay Black television characters. So it kind of reduced them to a caricature. They're usually portrayed as not real men. Gay is kind of just this phase. It's something that can be curable. Also, a lot of times we'll see the parents kind of take center stage, and it's kind of like this parental mistake. What could we have done differently? How did we mess up in this? Also, the men are portrayed as being very sexually promiscuous, non-monogamous, and sometimes, once in a while, they'll be referred to as just human. It's just a human condition, right? But they equate kind of a human condition of being self-destructive and emotionally anguished, is what we see in these different portrayals. And we'll take a look at some here in a few. But what we really come down to is that a lot of these gay Black characters, specifically that are on network and cable television, are sanitized for the social consumption of a majority of a white audience, right? And so because of that, we say that they're safe, they're acceptable. They have these sanitized, racialized masculinities, if you will. So one queer Black character that we see on television appeared in The Wire, and his name is Omar. Here you can see he is very kind of this rugged, what we might consider a thug type of guy. He's tough, he's got the cornrows, he has street smarts. He also is criminally inclined, he does a lot of bad things. He's very masculine, and he's very stereotypically ethnic by the way he talks, the way he walks, the way he dresses, how he interacts with people. And so again, that's kind of how they portray this character. Another one is Carter from Spin City. He's still portrayed as masculine, but he's juxtaposed with a very effeminate, hypersexualized white partner. And so the two, of course, this is a comedy, and so the two play off of one another, but Carter still asserts his masculinity. Nobody knows that Carter's gay. Sometimes he has to kind of tell them he's gay and introduce him to his partner. And so because he's put with this partner who is very effeminate and comedic, his very stoic, masculine ethos stands out very in stark contrast to that. Another person who is kind of shown in the similar fashion, but not in a comedy, in a drama. 6 Feet Under specifically is Keith. Keith is also very masculine. He's juxtaposed with this white, effeminate partner, and because of that, he looks more masculine, right? He's also very muscular in stature. He is a policeman, so he has already that very masculine job, and he portrays himself with a lot of confidence. So again, we kind of see this pattern here of the black gay man being portrayed as very masculine and homo masculine, homo heteronormative, patriarchal, in fact. And then another person we see is Lafayette from True Blood, one of my favorite shows of all time. I actually own all the seasons in DVD and Blu-ray, which I don't know why I did that, but now I have them. Anyway, he's very masculine as well too, but at the same time flamboyant. So the way that he kind of dresses, it goes back and forth. It's very sexually ambiguous. He plays a lot with different types of gendered roles and clothing that is for both these traditional dichotomous male-female gender type of clothing that we would see. So he is mixing back and forth, very ambiguous, just gender non-binary is what we might even consider him. He sells drugs. He runs this erotic porn website. He prostitutes himself and other people. He's very cocky, and he refers to himself, and others refer to him in the show as ghetto, right? So he still has this kind of masculine ethos about him, but flamboyant at the same time. So we can see as kind of time progresses and we have these different depictions of these gay black men, they seem to still be masculine, but as we get to Lafayette, we start to see a little bit of gender bending come into play with that as well too. So something that is very important is when we think about what the term authenticity is. What does it mean to be authentically masculine, an authentic black guy, to be authentically Latino, to be authentically American, right? We always throw this word around authentic. You hear it a lot in advertisements too. Do you want authentic Mexican food? Do you want an authentic Puerto Rican vacation, right? What is authenticity? And usually it's a function of different types of language, right? How do we use language in terms to create this authenticity? It could be the way language is used in terms of the specific language, right? Spanish, French, those types of things. Accents, names, what we call certain types of things. Also actors, right? Who are the people that are chosen to portray these different types of individuals in these mediated texts? And then, of course, the social settings themselves. What is the nature of the interaction? Symbolic interactions, remember that too. And the interpretation the actors bring to the setting and the interaction amongst one another. Also, when we think about black masculinity specifically, like what does it mean to be authentically black and masculine? It's usually characterized by physical strength, aggression, heterosexuality definitely, boldness, and the performance of this traditional patriarchal gender role. And different academics have looked at this and kind of seen this as a reoccurring pattern of all these different characteristics in this authentic black masculinity, and not just TV shows, but also movies and music as well too. So when we look at querying Empire and looking at Jamal, right, we see that there are three main themes that seem to evolve when we're looking through a queer lens, right? Looking at, yes, the sexuality being central, but all these other identities that kind of revolve and evolve around it. And one is more salient depending on the interaction, right? There is a lot of queer stereotypes. There is definitely this black masculinity that kind of comes out during the first season of Empire, and this hip-hop authenticity. Those are the three major themes that I will talk about. When we look at Jamal's journey, he calls himself a sissy, and the word sissy is used so many times in the first series, the first season of the series. Leviticus is also something that is used. It's the name of Lucius Lyon's club, and he doesn't let Jamal perform there because he's gay. So again, Leviticus referring to the book of the Bible where there's a specific mention of a man should not lay with another man. So that's very symbolic for the show itself. The journey of Jamal from being a single person to finding out he has a child. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen any of the seasons. But it turns out the child is not his. But again, how does he become a father? And throughout the episodes, we see that he takes responsibility of being a man and doing what a man should do to take care of his offspring. And then we find out it's not his. His coming out process is also very masculine in the way he kind of just asserts that he's gay and everybody should accept it. But the first couple of episodes, you really see him dealing with this sissy, right? He calls himself a sissy, and then just being like, bam, I'm masculine. He's not emotional. He stands up for himself. And then he just calls himself a man all these times. Everyone says, man, be a man up, all these different types of things. At the end of the season, he faces one of his arch nemesis, who is a rapper. And the rapper doesn't want to be part of the label anymore because Jamal, spoiler alert again, ends up getting control of his dad's empire because he proves himself to be a masculine man by getting kicked out, living on his own, living in what we might refer to as the ghetto, almost killing a man, fighting with people. He asserts his masculinity through these very stereotypical masculine characteristics, so he gets the empire. But then this rapper's like, I'm not gonna let this gay man be my boss. So I want to be out of it. And so Jamal has a confrontation with him, and I will put that video for you up on Blackboard. That way we don't have to stop and look at it right now. But there's all these links here as well too in your PowerPoint that will take you to different YouTube snippets of the specific instances where we can demonstrate all these different things in Jamal's journey. So what are some of the queer stereotypes? The characters, like I say, will talk about Jamal. There's instances where Jamal interacts with the characters. And so we really see these queer stereotypes start to evolve throughout the season. Your sexuality, that's a choice, son. So again, this stereotype that being gay is a choice. It's not something you're born with. And Lucius really says it a lot to him. The night is to celebrate a man and his woman, not some sensitive punk and his bitch. So again, the words in which Lucius himself is using to police masculinity. And then again, equating being gay to being effeminate to being a woman. So again, when we think about hegemonic masculinity, right? It's not so much that he's gay, because remember, he gets the empire at the end. It's that he doesn't want his son to be effeminate. He doesn't want his son to be like a woman. So again, hegemonic masculinity is coming into play here. You have to be higher up on that hierarchy, not at the bottom. And then Cookie, who has been his supporter and loving and affectionate, says a couple of things too that aren't very kosher. She says to his ex-boyfriend, whenever they break up, she says he's toughening up, he's becoming a top. So again, the idea that if you're the penetrating partner, if you are using sexual promiscuity, dominance, you're aggressive, you're a man, you're tough. Very, very stereotypical here. And then you just don't tell anyone that you're gay, right? So it's okay to be gay as long as we don't talk about it. And this happens a lot in different cultured communities, that a man can still have sex with whom he wants to as long as he fulfills his manly duties and doesn't talk about it, right? You act like a man, be a man, and do what you want behind closed doors. Just don't let us find out about it. It's another big queer stereotype, especially when we look at it through a queer lens and look at the culture in which Jamal is embedded in, which is the black culture, the hip hop culture, right? You don't talk about things like that. And then black masculinity also is reified a lot through the interactions, but also through the words that are said. So here's Jamal saying, Dad, I get it, because a sissy can't sell records to the black community. So again, he's insinuating that the black community does not like effeminate men. That's good, but try not to sound defensive. The goal of talking points is to make you sound non-emotional. And this is what they're telling Lucius as he's going on the air. So again, that you have to be non-emotional, because then that equates you again to being less than masculine. Ooh, it just sounds like you grew a vagina, that's all. Cookie telling Lucius that. I liked you better when you was a thug. Cookie telling Lucius that. And again, we see here that women in the show are also policing masculinity in order for them to reify this black masculinity. Lucius says, but you know, men don't cry. I'm my own man. He says men don't cry. And then Jamal, when he finally stands up and comes out, he says, I'm my own man. My obedience is no longer for sale. And then when he's in the elevators with his brothers, they're all kind of hugging each other. And Jamal says, yo, stop with that gay shit. So again, this policing of masculinity, behavior and rhetoric to reinforce this masculinity in the show itself too. And then hip-hop authenticity. What does it mean to be authentic to hip-hop? Like I said, Jamal moved out of his parents' house. He no longer had money. He went to what was referred to as the ghetto in the show, a lower socioeconomic status neighborhood. He endured violence. He fought with people, almost killed a guy. And then he was authentic because then he could sing about his lived experiences, right? He didn't pretend to be hip-hop. He was hip-hop. He was authentic. So here's a couple more lines from the show. Because she's lived through a hell that you have to understand if your music is ever going to elevate to a place of poetry where it resonates in the hearts of listeners. Lucius talking to his son who really hasn't lived the life that his mother had lived. My music expresses my world. That's how I grew up. Again, you live the life. I write my own stuff, period. If you're hip hop, you write what you feel, you write what you've experienced. I'm not performing nothing if you're running Empire Batiman. And this was what I was talking about with the rapper who didn't want to be under Jamal's leadership in Empire. Batiman is equated to like fag in Jamaican vernacular. Controversy is hip hop. That's how we get rich. What has this money done to you? What happened to you? So again, kind of pointing to this commercialization of hip hop that we talked about a couple of modules ago. So what do we take away from Empire? Hip hop reifies a black masculinity that is homophobic, ephemophobic, and of course misogynistic. But that's what we get from the movie, right? That's what we get from the, not the movie, the TV show series Empire. That's what they're reifying. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what hip hop is, but I think we can find different examples that we've seen in a couple of other instances, especially in the music module, where hip hop does reify that. But that isn't necessarily what hip hop is, right? The show also highlights a gay black man in hip hop, but it fails to fully address issues of racism, poverty, sexism, and misogyny, because at the end of the day, Jamal and his family are still rich and living at the top. The narrative still focuses on a man who, as a result of hegemonic masculinity, must express himself in patriarchal terms of language and behavior to be perceived as masculine. So at the end, he's accepted for his sexuality, but only because he was masculine. If he was effeminate, then how would he have been accepted, if at all? Homophobia then evolves into ephimophobia. It's a satirical look at these racialized masculinities. And